Welcome to Angel Wing Foundations of Angel Wing presentations. This is part number 8. This is Sachin Karnik. Today is the 18th of December, 2024. I want to do a quick review of some of the ideas that have been covered so far in the past 7 recordings and the past 7 presentations. The past 7 presentations have been created, or we were discussing the first entry into the Foundations of Angel Wing book. Please do keep in mind that these are technical presentations, sometimes quite highly technical, and they are at a level of difficulty that does require some contemplation. It's almost like a master's or doctoral level type of a analysis. So the entries that are in the book are quite intricate, so we're breaking them up and trying to really understand them carefully and systematically. So I'm going to go through the first entry again as a review, and then we'll see where it takes us a little bit further. So the intricacies of selfhood and subjectivity. The notion of the self encapsulates an individual positioned at the focal point of their introspective cognition. What that means is that we have our sense of who we are when we look within ourselves. That's what is meant by introspective cognition. So this idea, grounded in consciousness studies, is pivotal in understanding the complex workings of the human mind. There's a whole area in psychology and philosophy and neuroscience called consciousness studies that looks at what makes us conscious. And as part of that, the workings of the human mind are critical in trying to unravel the mystery of consciousness. So it's imperative to acknowledge that the comprehension of the self is inherently prejudiced as it epitomizes a subject's intrinsic reference to its own existence. Well, that simply means that when we try to see ourselves, we cannot see ourselves without our own prejudice, our own bias, our own conditioning. Very difficult to see ourselves that way. So that's why it's an intrinsic reference that is inherently prejudiced. I'm just going through a quick review. The past 7 recordings have gone into details on this in much more depth. So this biased perception is predicated on the idea that each individual holds a unique internal view of themselves. We all have a unique view of who we are. That perception of who we are is based on this internal view. So it's anchored in the personal experiences, cognitive processes, and emotional responses that shape one's understanding of one's distinctiveness. We have our own unique perspective, internal view, internal experiences, our own mental processes, emotional responses. This is quite distinctive. Consequently, an individual's perception of the self is tailored on their own subjectivity, rendering it a unique experience unfathomable in its entirety by others. Others cannot see the uniqueness of who we are, because it is tailored in one's own subjectivity. So, however, it's crucial to exercise caution and not conflate the idea of possessing a self or selfhood with the broader concept of subjectivity. So this notion of who I am can be conflated with my own subjective perceptions. But it's a caution given by this researcher, Morin, in his article in 2002, that the self and the subjectivity of how we perceive ourselves, the subjective nature, can be conflated. They can be like intermixed. And if we do that, then our understanding of the self might get quite mixed. It cannot be understood as clearly. So the two, albeit intertwined, represent distinct philosophical constructs. So the self is one construct and subjectivity is the other construct. So hopefully you listened to the first couple of recordings, and we've talked about what are constructs before. Right? So both of these are constructs. They're constructed by researchers over the years to try to pull together what is meant by the self and subjectivity. So the two are definitely intertwined. They represent distinct philosophical constructs. Subjectivity alludes to the overall realm of individual thoughts, feelings, and perspectives, encompassing a breadth of experiences beyond just the self. So whatever the self may be, maybe it's just a psychological construct, maybe it's a more spiritual self or some kind of a spiritual spark or something like that. It's a mystery as to what that is exactly. Researchers have tried to tease that out by stating that subjectivity alludes to, meaning the word subjectivity it's the realm of our thinking, our feeling, our perspectives. It's the TEMDE that we always talk about, thought, emotion, memory, desire, energy. That is part of our subjective experience, or that encompasses our subjective experiences. It encompasses a breadth of experiences beyond just the self. So is there a self that is transcendent to our subjective sense of who we are and our subjective experiences? That's one big question. So on the other hand, selfhood refers explicitly to an individual's sense of their own identity and existence. My sense of selfhood, I'm Sachin, I was born here, these are my memories, all of that, what does that do? That brings a certain amount of explicit understanding. This explicitity is an interesting word to use, that it's much more clear to me that I have my own identity, my own existence. That would be selfhood. So this is how these words are conceptualized in the scholarly field or in the analytical field. So selfhood involves recognizing oneself as a unique entity, separate from the surrounding world. I see myself as unique, seems to be something separate from the surrounding world. The surrounding world is there. There's no doubt about that. The surrounding world is definitely there. But it seems to me that this is somehow unique. I have my own sense of uniqueness. Where does that come from and all that? We'll look at that later on, but that's part of the conceptualization of selfhood. So separate from the surrounding world, I feel that I'm separate from the world outside. So this comprehension of individuality is what underpins the construct of the self and differentiates it from the overarching framework of subjectivity. I know this is a mouthful. These sentences are loaded. We'll try to really break them up. This is a review from last time, in fact. Right? So there's an overarching framework of subjectivity. We have that. Maybe it's psychological, maybe it's neuropsychological, whatever it may be. We have that. Right? But the unique entity of who I think of myself, is that something different, the construct of the self and how it differentiates it. The way that I think of myself as an individual, the comprehension of individuality. I comprehend myself as an individual, which is, and that comprehension is what underpins the construct of the self. It underpins, meaning it's the foundation for developing that construct of what is meant by the self, and that foundation differentiates it from the overall framework of subjectivity. The subjective experiences I have are somehow different from that from that underpinning of the construct of the self. It's a very tricky thing. They're intertwined, but they seem to be separate somehow also. So the intriguing facet of selfhood lies in its oscillatory projection, wherein it often seems to extend outward from the individual, transcending the physical confines of the body. Right? So the selfhood has to do with oscillatory projection, meaning what I can think of someone else, some situation external to me, but my sense of who I am seems to extend into the outer world. So it's an oscillation, and then it oscillates right back within me. The intriguing fact of selfhood lies in its oscillatory projection, where it often seems to extend outward from the individual, transcending the physical confines of the body. I can sense that this body is me. But then, let's say a parent is very much concerned about a child. So that sense of me extends to the other person, extends to another situation outside. So that sense of me extends externally. That's an oscillatory projection. It's a very fascinating word. So the intriguing facet of selfhood lies in its oscillatory projection, wherein it often seems to extend outward from the individual, transcending the physical confines of the body. So when For example, you have a mother and the child is in pain or crying or something like that. The mother feels so deeply one with the child. Why is that? Well, that's an example of an oscillatory projection, This extension could be construed as an attempt to relate to and comprehend the external world. Meaning, so why does this extension happen? It's a way of understanding the world. It's a way of relating to what is happening in the world. Like we see people suffering or we see something on TV. We feel it inside. We feel a sense of oneness with that. We feel it deeply emotionally. We feel hurt by seeing somebody else's pain, for example. Right? This is oscillatory projection. So the intriguing facet of selfhood lies in its oscillatory projection. It's an intriguing facet of selfhood. The oscillatory projection is one facet of selfhood. Right? So the selfhood about my individual sense of who I am, it projects this way in an oscillatory way, wherein it seems to extend outward from the individual, transcending the physical confines of the body. Now, this extension could be construed as an attempt to relate to and comprehend the external world, which is an integral a part of the human cognitive process. Our thinking, our cognition, our sense of our higher brain function, etc., has that ability to comprehend the outside world, to understand it better, because if we cannot oscillate into the external world psychologically, we cannot understand it also. But then we also cannot relate to it. So we need to relate to it, we need to understand it, and hence the oscillation externally definitely occurs. So this extension could be construed as an attempt to relate to and comprehend the external world, which is integral to human cognitive process. And that is an idea from Metzinger, 2003. So, okay, now let's move on. However, this is where our today's presentation actually is to begin here at this point. However, this outward projection invariably reverts, turning back inward to the point towards its origin, the self. And that's the mystery. That's the absolute mystery. Like, what in the world is that actual self, and how and why is it actually projecting back internally to who we are? That is the great mystery. I'm going to show you some slides here now. This is where our presentation begins here. All right. I'm glad one person logged on so I could do this live. All right. Let's do this here. So you'll see this is the actual quote from the book here. So however, this outward projection invariably reverts, turning back inward to the point towards its origin, the self. This reflexive process, wherein the self references back to itself, forms a cyclical pattern that fosters a sustained and consistent sense of self over time. I know it's a mouthful. I'm going to try to break it down for you. It's really awesome stuff to really try to understand this. All right, let's go step by step. There's an outward projection. Something outside is happening. Maybe it's a mother to a child. Maybe it's watching something on TV. Maybe it's watching a beautiful scenery outside. It could be anything. Doesn't matter. Something outside is going on. So the sense of projection outside is there. Projection means what, by the way? That our sense of who I am seems to connect with what is outside. And there's a lot of theories on that in philosophy of mind also, about the non-duality of that. All right, let's go further. But this oscillation, it turns back inward to the point towards its origin, the self in quotation. Now, this is the interesting thing. Doesn't that happen? Our mind, our thoughts go externally towards people, places, situations, things, whatever. And then after some time, they kind of turn back inward into myself again. So the thoughts, emotions, memories, desires, and energies, all five, they oscillate externally and then they come back internally. You see, so they come back internally, and this is a reflexive process. So the researcher there who has talked about some of this is Legrand, Legrand, 2007. So this reflexive process, wherein the self references back to itself, forms a cyclical pattern that fosters a sustained and consistent sense of self over time. Now, that's a mouthful, so let's break that up. Very amazing stuff. First of all, this goes back and forth. This back and forth that goes on, even as children are growing up and whatnot, they're developing this ability. This actually, the cyclical pattern, what does it do? It fosters a consistent and sustained sense of self. The sense of who I am develops more and more and more, the more this oscillation goes back and forth in a cyclical manner. And which is part of my commentary would be that's part of the conditioning process that really, really goes on here. Amazing that this is, this is the intense research that we have done over so many years in Angel Wing to try to explain these ideas, right? So this introspective cycle thus becomes vital in shaping our self-perception and identity. So the shaping of our identity, the shaping of our self-perception occurs through this introspective cycle. And I hope that makes sense. It's a cycle. It goes back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that shapes my identity, the identity of the individual, and the perception of who I am, how I see myself, how do I perceive myself. Okay. So this dual process of outward projection and inward reversion further elucidates the complexity of selfhood. So this is a way to try to unravel the complexity of selfhood, because there's so much involved in it. So it underscores how we understand the self. It underscores how our understanding of the self is not static or confined, but is continuously evolving, shaped by our interactions with the external world and our reflections of these interactions, right? So our understanding, our own vision of who we are, point number one, is not static. It's not a static self. It's changing. It's dynamic. And it's not static, nor is it confined. It's not confined just to a limited framework there, but is continuously evolving. Our sense of the self is evolving and evolving and evolving. Our identity is evolving. Who Sachin is now was not a year ago the same Sachin. The same Sachin was not there 2 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So it's an evolution further. And that needs to be understood. Sometimes we get stuck in the feeling of the staticness, which is not really the case. It's something worth really contemplating on. So the self is not static or confined, but is our consciously evolve, but is continuously evolving. Is continuously evolving, shaped by, meaning what, our evolution, our sense of self is shaped by our interactions with the external world and our reactions on and our reflections on these interactions. So the interaction with the external world is part of this whole process, and then our reflection on the interaction. I have an interaction with 10 people outside, okay? But then that I start to reflect on that, and that reflection internally further develops the sense of who I am. I know this is a bit technical, but it is a technical workshop, so it's going to get technical. That's what this is about. So understanding the delicate balance between the outward projection of selfhood and its inward reversion elucidates how self-perception contributes to an individual's experience of reality. Let's break that up carefully. So there's a delicate balance between the outward projection of selfhood and the inward reversion. It goes out and in, out and in. Like a mother towards a child, she's thinking about the child and caring for the child, etc. There's an outward projection, of the sense of who I am. I mean, of course, there's that. The mother is not the child, but the mother is linked to the child, and the sense of self extends to the other person, right? So this happens quite a bit. So this outward projection of selfhood, it's a balance between this outward projection and the inward reversion. The inward reversion meaning it comes back inside. This is the oscillation. And if we are aware of the movement of our mind oscillates this way, outward, inward, outward, inward, outward, inward. It just goes on. So understanding the delicate balance between the two, there's a delicate balance between the two, between the outward projection and the inward reversion. What does it do? It elucidates, meaning it clarifies for us how self-perception contributes to an individual's experience of reality. How is it that I experience, what it is that I experience myself externally, internally, and my own perception, so it elucidates self-perception, how self-perception contributes to my individual experiences of reality. You see, my self-perception contributes to my experience because there is this oscillation. Let's just understand it a little bit more clearly. First of all, there's a delicate balance. That balance between the outward and the inward reversion, outward projection, inward reversion. The balance between the outward projection and the inward reversion is necessary because it elucidates, it clarifies for us, our own self-perception and our own individual experience of reality. That's how our individual experience of reality is elucidated. Okay, I hope you're following this. I know I'm going a little fast, but I want to just get through some points here, then we'll open it up for discussion. It is definitely quite a bit. It's difficult to understand, and it is technical. So this continuous cycle of self-referential introspection refines our understanding of the existence and adds depth. Let me read that again. This continuous cycle of self-referential introspection refines our understanding of existence and adds depth to our subjective experiences. Let's understand that sentence carefully. First of all, it's a continuous cycle. Self-referential introspection. It's a beautiful way to put it. I'm seeing myself in the context of my own references, externally and internally. All right? But I don't want to elaborate too much on that because it would take hours, but let's cover it in brief here. So this is a continuous cycle of self-reference. All right, it's a continuous cycle of self-referential introspection. Am I not talking to myself, the internal soliloquy that's going on? Yes, it is. So self-referential introspection goes on, and this cycle refines our understanding, the refinement of our understanding of our own existence. People question their existence. People question what's happening within. It's a refinement of our own existence, of our understanding of our own existence, and this cycle of self-referential introspection adds depth to our subjective experiences. So our subjective experiences that's our life, that's our whole life. But when we reflect, when we contemplate, when we introspect, there's depth to the experience. For example, if a person is in relationship with another person, maybe let's say a romantic relationship, there's going to be a lot of depth of subjective experience developed because of the self-referential introspection. That's why. Take the relationship with an addictive substance, or with gambling, or with hypersexuality, or something like that, or shopping, or whatever, one of the addictions. What is that? That's another very stark example of self-referential introspection, where there are intricate dynamics, where the subjective experience gets much more solidified. Okay, so now let's get further. So in summary, comprehending the intricate dynamics of selfhood and its relation to subjectivity offers valuable insight into the human cognitive process. Let's break that up carefully. So our comprehension of the selfhood, the dynamics, is it a dynamic phenomena? Yes. That is why in the Tuesday evening, the PTP program, we have all of those principles and ideas that allow us to become more aware of the dynamics of who I am. Where am I headed in my life? Things like that. The transformative journey, right? So comprehending this intricate dynamics of selfhood and its relation to subjectivity. Selfhood, my sense of who I am, the more formed sense of who I am, and then my subjective experiences that are coming and going. The two, the dynamics of their relationship between selfhood and subjectivity, what does it do? It offers valuable insights into the human cognitive process. It brings insight into what's happening inside of me, the process that is going on inside of me, my cognitive process, my mental process. It allows for a deeper understanding of individuality, consciousness, and the complexity of human experience. 3 points. As we understand this oscillation phenomena and everything we've talked about here today, where does it lead us? It leads us to a much deeper understanding, awareness of what is individuality. I have my sense of individuality, but once we contemplate on it, once we research it, once we meditate on it, as we dialogue on this perspective, as we try to unravel the various constructs that researchers have developed, It allows us to develop and really open a much more profound understanding of who I am, of individuality, my sense of separateness from others, consciousness, my sense of being alive and feeling and awareness and all that conscious, and the complexity of human experience. Human experience is very complex, so this is a way to go into this. Now, further research in this area is likely to further our comprehension of selfhood and subjectivity, contributing to more nuanced models of human cognition and consciousness. So this is all academic research pretty much. And then also the research in the laboratory and psychometrics and neurological research and stuff like that where does subjectivity come from? What is selfhood? What is human cognition, consciousness? Big ideas. But this is the first entry inside the Foundations of Angel Wing book. Now, I have a whole bunch of slides here, which I will load tomorrow or day after tomorrow for sure. I'll get it all loaded and on this point, and that really break this up. I kind of went fast here, but you can see some of the points here that we have already covered and can kind of go through that. So there's a lot of depth in this. It's not easy to understand. It takes time to really reflect on this for those who are interested. As I stated before, my hope is that master's or doctoral level students in psychology or neuroscience or positive psychology or any of those areas would pick up on these recordings and these slides and the Foundations book and stuff like that, and they can do, and that'll be helpful for them to do their research and dissertations or thesis and stuff like that. We're hoping for that in the future. We haven't started that outreach yet, but at some point we will definitely do that. Right. So having said that, I'll stop the presentation here, open it up for discussion, dialogue. We just have one person online right now. So, okay. Ms. Teresa, do you have any comments or questions or anything you'd like to say about this at all?